think at the end of the day, it's similar. It's just a muscle that you need to exercise. And some of the most difficult, it's just difficult getting started, I suppose, right? And even for those who start, obviously you go through that writer's block, um, which of course, this is just the way it is. The hardest thing about being a writer is being a writer, and I wrote that down in my journal. It's like I want to find a place one day to say that. And I think this is a good place to say it for the first time.
Good Friday, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Weekly Bustle. Today, I am actually talking about a book that has been written about AI by David Cantor, who is here with me. And I would like to know a lot about this book, David. So before we even get into it, I cannot even introduce David because I want the guests to introduce themselves. So without further ado, David, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing well, Ahad. Thanks for having me.
Indeed.
So, yeah, I guess you want a little introduction? Is that what you
Indeed. Yes. Yes.
hoping for? Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. I'll give you a brief insight into who I am, which I'm still figuring out, by the way. All right. I'm almost 40 years old and I have one existential crisis after another. And I've learned, and I have two young daughters, right? I have a wonderful wife, been together over a decade, so I'm very much a family man. But I've learned that existential crises in my life are just something I can't shake. And actually, I think that's the creative force in many ways, right? So a bit about myself. I mean, I'm from the States, born and raised in New York. Been around the world. After 10 years recently in Manhattan, made a jump to Europe. I live in Italy with my family, work remotely. I've been writing my entire life, privately, professionally, but nothing ever publicly, really, such as a book. And so I have one other memoir that I released about 10 years ago, um, kind of a rant about existential crises in life. And that was a memoir, nonfiction. It's out there now as well. It's been republished. There were a total of two copies that were printed when I first wrote it. And now, yes, this is my debut fiction. And I couldn't be more privileged to have had the, I guess, opportunity to write it. It took me over 2 years to write this book. And it's a decade of observations as well. So you can place the time span of these observations. I said I was almost 40 years old, so you can kind of understand the trajectory I'm coming in and the time frame in history. Um, and yeah, that's kind of fast forward to where we are today. Again, very privileged to get this book out in these times, in a very busy world, and it feels fulfilling. So I'm looking forward to the next existential crisis.
I really like the existential crisis you're going through. I think so.
Yeah, sure. There you go.
The book is a product of one of your existential crises. I'm imagining.
Yeah, it's I would say it's a distilled version of it. And a lot of my writing tends to be throughout life, a lot of reflections, right? A lot of, the context of your times and where you are. If you're traveling and, you're writing about what's around you and big questions in life, and those have never stopped, right?
Yeah.
And this similar story, I mean, I was on a plane where I do a lot of my best writing
Wow.
and just started to write about technology and started to write very factually about tech and the influence it's had in our lives. And because it's so apparent, it's so visual, it's so present. And I've written a lot about it, but I never just had it like an essay form about it. And
Yeah.
that's really what it was in the beginning. It was like me just complaining about technology and how it's ruining our relationships amongst people. And when I have two girls in the world, I'm thinking about them and their future.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I was meanwhile reading a book, finishing a book by an author named Daniel Quinn, and the book is called Ishmael.
Yeah.
It was written in the early 90s, and it was very inspirational because Daniel Quinn took some very big concepts of his times, very macro issues in like the 80s and 90s, such as human population growth, consumerism, industrialism, um, things that he wrote essays on, hundreds of pages of essays. And he distilled it into a book called Ishmael, which is basically a main character talking to a gorilla. So that distillation, that framework, I was like very inspired by.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, you know what? Instead of me ranting in these essays about tech, maybe there's a different way to write the story. Maybe there's a different way to get some of these points across. So, very much inspired by that framework by Daniel Quinn.
That's very, very interesting. So, what I understand is you are a writer, you always have been a writer. So, I want to get a little bit into that before we get into the book. And before we get into that,
Sure.
I want to understand, why did you move all the way from the States to Italy?
A lot of reasons, I suppose. Timing was right at the end, right? As mentioned, we have two children, two young daughters, and New York City. I'm not sure if you've been or if you've lived. I mean, energetic city, great city, awesome when you don't have kids. So like we kept getting bigger, but our apartment was like staying the same size,
Yeah.
and you have to make a decision, and I have
Yeah.
family that's, straight up New York bred. And I've been able to understand what it's like to live and raise a family in New York. And my wife, she's originally from China, met her in Shanghai, but she's European. So put that together. I mean, she actually, like, when she was 5, migrated here with, and grew up here, so
To
she
Italy.
considered herself European. Yeah, to Italy. And
Ah,
so there's a bit of a base, so for 10 years where, we've been together dating and, eventually engaged and married, we were always coming back to Europe, always coming to Italy because, we have family here. And, my first experiences in Europe were just mind blowing. I'm in my young 20s and I'm in Venice and arrived there and I'm eating bacala and drinking spritz and it all costs €5 and the food comes with it.
yeah.
And I'm like, my mind was blown by Europe right away. Romantic, drawn in. So we always dreamed about it. We always came back. And then finally, we were at I guess, a position in our careers, respectively, and lives. We're like, let's just go see how it goes. And this is like 4.5 years later. I'm actually half Italian. Well, half Italian. I'm Italian. I got my citizenship.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's funny because she's the Italian. The Chinese one, when we cross borders, they like look at me. I'm like, all right, here's the Italian. And then, but no, she's actually like the Italian.
No, I know
So,
exactly what you mean,
yeah, yeah.
because my wife is Afghan, and I'm Pakistani.
Okay.
But my wife lived
Okay.
her life here. So she moved here to the Netherlands when she was 5 years old. So she's not
Ah,
as Afghan as she is Dutch. And
right.
of course, we both don't look European, so both of us are stopped wherever we go to just check if we're actually Europeans or not. But I'm also a citizen now, thanks to her. So I've been here for 5 years as
Awesome.
well. Yeah, so it's a very, very similar trajectory.
Awesome.
So it's
Yeah,
very
and you know what's
nicely.
the funniest thing? It's like the simplest, most fundamental, like the ways we identify ourselves with. Like for I love it. Like for her, it's always confusing. Like, what's your name? Well, she's got obviously her original Chinese name, Jaha, and then
Mm.
she's got her Italian name, which everybody calls her by, and socially on IDs even. It's like so even like the question of like what's your name is confusing, for her, and I enjoy that. That
Yeah.
kind of, now I don't know if you have children or not, but
Yeah, young daughter
obviously bringing
myself.
that whole thing
Yeah.
into, there you go. Yeah. Wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful. So like the way we identify ourselves within the world is constantly changing.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that's a little bit also goes into what we want to talk about with the technological progress that's happening, right? It's getting more and more murky what we
Mm,
identify with. It gets more and more murky who we are and what is authentic, right? So I want to get
mm,
into the book now. No, 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 not the book. I want to get into your writing process first, right? And you know why I'm very
sure.
curious? Because I started this project a while back, and in the start of the year I started writing myself, right? Weekly
Okay.
reflections, as you said, right? Weekly reflections, everything from my job, my different clients, my life, my a story of new fatherhood. My little one is just like 4 months old, so I'm really, really
Oh,
like a fresh
congratulations.
father. Thank you so much. So I
Yeah,
write down my
definitely
reflections.
fresh.
So for me it's very, very difficult, the writing process. I'm more of a speaker than a writer. right? I like talking. If you talk to me right now, I can articulate my thoughts very, very clearly. But if you have to ask me to write it down, I'm a younger generation that I feel like the less words you type, the more you can express yourself, right? With more pictures and
Mm.
more GIFs and more memes. So for me, the writing process has always been a bit difficult. So talk me through, why did you want to become a writer? How did you become a writer? And any tips for people like me who are trying to write a little bit more in their lives, that what would be your the biggest tip that you can offer?
Well, yeah, awesome question. I mean, writing, it's a muscle, right? I think at the end of the day, it's similar. It's just a muscle that you need to exercise. And some of the most difficult, it's just difficult getting started, I suppose, right? And even for those who start, obviously you go through that writer's block, um, which, of course, this is just the way it is. The hardest, the hardest thing about being a writer is being a writer. And I wrote that down in my journal. It's like I want to find a place one day to say that. And I think this is a good place to say it for the first time. So I hope people out there are listening. The hardest thing about being a writer is being a writer. And there's so many different ways you can do it. Like from a mechanical lens, there's a very big difference in the output. So, there's a very big difference between picking up a pen and just writing with ink onto a paper. And this form, it's a mechanical form, and you'll find that the output is even different if you do that. You have the patience to sit down 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, force yourself to write something. Um, Something's going to come out, right? And it's very different than when you have 10 fingers or whatever on home keys on a computer, and you're just pumping out content and you're pumping out text and you're connected in a different way to yourself. And it's not to say one is more advantageous than another. It's just to say that in my entire life of writing, different reflections, different feelings, different depths of emotion have come out in both. I can remember visceral feelings of sitting under a candlelight and writing in a journal. And there's something that transcends time. There's something that transcends space. If you listen to this, I mean, you're talking about something ancient, right? You're talking about doing something that you feel in this moment of time. The ink that's spilling into this page is the only way for me to connect with the world. It's the only way for me to, leave something, to ask these questions, to find answers, and to seek it out. And you're not doing it with anyone else except yourself. You have nothing else. You're not plugged into to a Google search bar and looking for answers there. It's a very intimate feeling, and the more honest you can be with yourself, the deeper you get into your life, the deeper you get into your connection with the world for whatever reason you write. So that's for what it's worth, right?
Oh, I really, really
Um,
understand it.
I've I've filled up journals and pages torn off of bar napkins, and there's half of it's lost. I have no idea where half of this stuff is in the world anymore. It's somewhere, but it came out, and there was a moment where I actually had to stop writing, Ahad. I had to stop writing because I felt it was too much. It was dictating many decisions in my life, in a good way, but it was like I wasn't letting enough life happen. I wasn't letting experience get in enough, right? Before reflecting, before writing something. And it was a point of like, hey, am I going crazy? Like, what's going on? I'm in my mid-20s. Like, am I losing my mind? Like, look what's on the paper. Look, if somebody read this, they would put me in a penitentiary because what is this? And so it's hard. It's a battle. It's something that with yourself you learn. I feel it's different for everyone, but for me it was my way of really uh you know identifying who I am and still figuring that out, right?
Yeah, yeah. So for some people, it is easier to write, and then they start understanding what they're writing. And some people already know what they want to
Hmm.
write, right? So it's like you already have that information in your head and you know what you're writing. But some people writing while writing realize that, oh, this is what I'm thinking. So it's an exercise in also getting to know yourself.
Well said. And
Yeah,
what are you writing for? That's also the thing sometimes, right? Because are you writing for yourself in a journal, or are you thinking about an audience,
yeah, indeed. That really
right? Are
makes a
you thinking
difference.
about, hey, I'm writing this blog article and I can't wait to publish this and blast it through social media? Like that's a different, trajectory and a different connection with the way that you're writing,
Yeah, indeed, indeed. If it's more
you know?
personal, if it's more intimate, you have a different flow that's going on than compared to a book that you're writing or a blog that you're writing, in which okay, the grammar matters, or the hooks matter, or the way I'm writing matters, but that is just thoughts and feelings. Sometimes it's just words on a
Yeah.
paper. You're not doing anything. It's like I always read it that people say, just put your brain on a paper. That's what you're doing sometimes, and that's what you like to do at the end of the day. For me, when I try to
And
do it,
that can make people, right? Sorry.
no, no,
No,
no,
go ahead.
go for it, go for it. This is
No, because you're naked, right? Like you said, you put your thoughts on the paper, you put your brain on paper. Like you also like that's yourself. Like this is your true self. So you feel naked, you feel exposed,
yeah,
and that can be a pretty scary feeling.
indeed, indeed. I think. And but you know what? A little bit of tangent here, David. I really think more people do need to do this because in this day and age, we do not really have people who go beyond the surface anymore. Because there is no time for people to reflect anymore. Self-reflection is a form of reflection in general, right? And people don't have time to reflect. If you look around, social media, telephones, and just the attention economy, they have taken all the reflection out of us. We don't have time to breathe or time to think anymore. People have to take out time to think or breathe, like meditation, or okay, should I write down my thoughts every night, or do I something, or do I do something, or do I do something not, etc., etc. And it's shocking to me. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well said. Progress is like the tide, right? It's relentless. It's gonna happen. It's relentless. To me, survival is reflection, right? I mean, if we don't reflect, we will drown in progress. Reflection in this sense is basically swimming. If progress is the tide, reflection is swimming, right? And if we forget how to do that, we forget how to swim, we're gonna drown. We are drowning. We already are. I mean, as society, as people, um, and I'm a victim of this as well, right? Where we thinking 120 words of text, and this is an attention. Well, how did you phrase it? Like the span of attention in these times.
Yeah,
I
like
mean, it
go.
it's evolved,
Yeah,
right? It's evolved. I used to joke with my wife when before, after we had kids, I said our conversations went from, listening to like 5, 8 minute songs to like a Beatles soundtrack. Our conversations. It was like, you know, these quick, small snippets of conversation that you have to get in quickly because you know that a kid's gonna needs to be fed. You have another like demand coming your way. So our conversations, just by virtue of having a kid, chopped up the way that we conversed,
yeah,
and that's not even bringing in the whole other exponential layer of technology that's been subtly infiltrating, our connections as people, our connections with ourself. Um, really, since, I guess you can say like we can go as far back as we went, but in my reflections, I only went back to what I know through experience, which is around the, 1980s, at the start of the modem,
yeah,
the dial-up modem. That's where I went. I was comfortable. I
yeah,
was old enough to, hey, say, what the hell is this thing in our house that's blinking in my desk, in my parents' attic?
yeah,
What do you mean? You plug it into the wall and it's connected to a phone, and then, 8 minutes later, like you're online?
yeah.
Online? What the hell does that mean?
And online
So,
where? What is that? What is
yeah,
this
online
world?
where? Where am I? I'm here. I could be anybody I want. What do
Yeah,
you mean? I could tell this person in a chat, I'm talking to somebody, and they're in California. Well, I could say I'm in California, even though I'm from New York.
yeah,
I could say I have blonde hair and blue eyes. I surf. I don't know how to surf. I've never surfed, but you could be anybody you want behind zeros and ones. Like this was uh, an experience in the adolescent stage, right, where it's like mind blowing. And I mean, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself here, Ahad, but the way we were starting to communicate already with the infiltration of technology. It evolved so rapidly that if we fast forward to where we are now, to understand and reflect on how far we've come, how fast we've come, there's value in that. There's value in reflection, like you said,
Yeah, indeed.
right? Progress can also be defined in reflection.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think I really resonate with what you're saying, because we're so busy in doing, as what you said, progress is a tide. If you don't know, if you don't constantly reflect, you don't constantly check what you're doing, where you're going, you will not know where you are. The tide is going to take you away into a different
mm,
place. You might get beached, you might be on a different deserted island. You don't know where you're going. And when you're swimming,
mm,
at least you have a little bit of control on, okay, where am I going, where am I, what is the trajectory of my journey. I feel like you take back control a little bit when you reflect, because
mm,
people don't want to take control anymore. And going on the topic of what you said about talking to people online, and seeing how technology has completely evolved our way of communicating, but we haven't evolved. So that also goes back to the same concept of control, that we had control back in the day. We used to talk to people around us, even if we didn't agree with them, we knew we had to live with them. So there was a sense of controlling mechanism as on a societal level, that okay, I don't agree with
sure.
you, right? You have a different opinion, I have a different opinion, but we both support the New York Knicks, for example. So it's okay. We have to learn to live with each other. But now online, I disagree with the person, and there is no bond, societal bond, to keep us from fighting against each other. And now you have havoc here, like ideological differences and belief systems, and they're like, no, you're wrong, and no, you're wrong, and no, you're wrong. So I really am quite interested in how like our
Mm,
technology has evolved in our communication space, and now AI is coming in, which is also making things more blurry. People are these days are becoming so lazy, they don't even type anymore. They just ask AI to type out job letters for them and do everything for them. This book that you wrote, that's where I want to
mm.
take it now. Did you when did you write it? When did it get
Yeah.
released?
It was released about 15 days ago.
15 days ago.
Into the world. Yeah. And I started writing it a little over 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And but the reflections are a decade-long reflections. There's writing in there that I've pulled from other works
Yeah.
that are 10 years old, that
Yeah.
are still very relevant. So, but the writing process has been, yeah, around 2 years. And the wild thing is, um, I mean, AI didn't bubble up to the surface, right? When I started writing this, it's a hidden theme in the novel. Okay. It's actually something that you don't even know there's references to it at all. I mean, I don't mention it, I believe, except for maybe in the back summary of the book. And I'm not going to give any spoiler alerts to you now, but you'll see that there is no deliberate mention of artificial intelligence, which makes even more powerful theme, I hope so, in the novel. And so why I was so it was amazing for me to see how AI just erupted all of a sudden, you
That's it.
know, in the midst of this, of me, putting the final touches really on what I've written. And I had an even deeper set. I had a sense of urgency to begin with. I've had a sense of urgency since I started Existential Crises a couple of years ago. But even that, like all of a sudden, when AI exploded into the world, I'm like, all right, this is not cool. And then even last week, Amazon comes out with a commercial chatbot called Q. I don't know if you've seen that for
I don't know.
businesses. Amazon. I mean, they're taking my title. This is the source, Q. Okay? Everyone out there listening to Had, this is the source of Q. It's in these pages made by a human. Okay? Made by a human. OpenAI has the whole thing with Q with a have you seen it? The asterisk, Q asterisk? With Sam Altman and the whole like, what is Q asterisk? This whole machine learning the same week as Amazon last week. So like this is very current times we're talking about. We're talking, and that's just a coincidence. Who knows? But I don't know. Are they scraping, my book? Are they getting in there? Do they see me listed on Amazon with 5 reviews? Like, do they like Q that much? Can't
You
have
never know.
Q. Can't. You never know. You never know, right? And so it's scary times that we live in. Okay, these are coincidences, sure, chalk it up to that. But I guess to answer your question, like I started writing this in a very different world.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know what I
that is
mean?
exactly what I was curious about because you're writing this for 2 years, and what has happened this year has been mind-baffling, right? The things that are working out now. So let's dive into the book. You don't mention AI directly in the book, so tell me, what is the book about, and
Hmm.
what are the key points or themes, without, of course, any spoilers if you don't want, that you are trying to explore in this book?
Sure. I mean, the heart of it, I think you even mentioned this not too long ago in this conversation. What's fleshy real? What's real, right? And so the biggest theme I started to think about immediately, based on observations, was witnessing this experience that people are having with technology, and knowing that this time that we're spending with technology, whatever form, whatever medium it is, right? Is that real? I mean, is the pleasure that we're deriving from these experiences, is that real pleasure? I mean, and questioning that, and questioning the both on the back end, meaning those who are creating this pleasure, the the creators, the engineers, the content marketers, anybody who's selling you their technology. What's the thought processes behind that? And then also on the receptor side, the consumer side, how are we defining this pleasure? And then the what's the distinguishing factor between that and what's real, fleshy real in our relationships, right? In love, in experiences that we're having. And I've seen this line blend, and these connections, not only that one has with himself, which is the most important connection, which I dubbed the 0 degree connection, but also the ones that we have with in relationships with others, and the connections that we have between people and how we're communicating, how we have conversations. You just gave a perfect example. People are maybe even afraid to disagree in person and have a conversation about that, um, without having maybe the support of AI helping them carve out that conversation. So we're losing the essence of how to communicate. And this is one of the major themes in the book, is understanding what that line is and what is the difference between something that's fleshy, real versus artificial. How do we know? And again, that's where AI is not explicitly mentioned at all. But I think, as a savvy reader, maybe once or second time around, we'll be able to understand where it comes in. And the book actually starts off with one of the most powerful symbols, which is nature, which is our mother, which is represented in a tree, specifically a willow tree. And if you look closely, even at the title itself, you can see this was designed by a Slovakian artist, by hand, and it's a willow tree, but there's dots. There's in between each of these, there's space. So it's very much symbolic of like binary code, right? Zeros and ones, and um, zeros and ones are very different than wavelengths, right? And how we receive wavelengths. And so there's many themes throughout the book. I would say that dualism between what's real and artificial is probably the most prevalent and pressing one.
Yeah, no, I think it already sounds like a very exciting book to me personally, because I always was obsessed with understanding the duality of things, especially in this year, right? When
Mm,
everything is becoming so blurry, and content creation is becoming a bit messy, and in general your work is also changing, right? You don't know what you're doing anymore. The whole concept of originality is being questioned, right? So I that is what I resonate with when I hear you say fleshy. I hear original, right? And like, okay, what
Mm.
it is us who are the originals, and now there is no original anymore. My friend made a joke about this that okay, now you're gonna put in 5 words in the AI machine to tell it to make a blog post for you, and then someone else would take your blog post, pin it, and then tell the AI to make a summary of it in 5 lines. So what's the point of going through this process of churning and creating content and this duality that exists? That do we need to? Can we not exist without it? Does it need to be there? Is it a replacement of what we have? And if it is it a good replacement? Right. So I want to
Hmm.
know a little bit of your thoughts. I really liked what you said in the start of the conversation, which was before we press the button, that you do not need to be an AI expert to talk about AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to know a little bit about your thoughts on AI, and I want to know a little bit of your thoughts on this phrase that you just said.
Sure. I mean, I think there's some good analogies to make, right? And I wrote a couple articles that were published. For example, there's a lot of fear that AI will take over and how it will threaten the labor force, your jobs, your livelihood, your ability to earn, right? And I read enough about this to be able to make somewhat of an informed opinion and write an op-ed on it and have it published about the threat of AI on human labor. And what I found was very interesting. I learned that, in fact, it's millennials that might be the ones who should be concerned. Why? Because AI itself is supposed to be easy, right? Like you just said, you put in 5 prompts and you pump out a blog article. You know, you put in 100 prompts, you write a book. I mean, it's like it's meant to make your certain administrative tasks, certain creative tasks, whatever it is, just easier. And that means anyone can do it. That means a company who has a very smart HR director or manager, why would they want to hire a millennial to do that when they can just retrain and reskill a manager who's been there 10 years, 5 years, who's experienced enough, who knows how to do other things, manage a team, right? Who knows the corporate culture, who has work experience, reskill them. And that's what they're doing. That's what big companies are going to continue to do. They're not going to necessarily say, hey, we need to bring in this millennial because he gets AI and he can make it. No, we can train our employees, pay a little bit more for their training, and then they can use AI tools in the workplace and figure it out because they're smart enough actually to do that. So I found that to be extremely enlightening uh, in some of my, just reading about what industry experts are writing about. And there's not like an AI specialist. I've met so many like AI gurus, self-proclaimed on like LinkedIn, the AI guy, or it's strange. It's equal to somebody calling themselves a visionary or a futurist. Any self-proclaimed visionary or futurist, I will never trust. Somebody who calls themselves an AI guy. I mean, you could write code. I could write code. I could put something into AI and say, hey, write me some basic code about this and that. If you have somewhat of a brain cell, you'll be able to leverage AI to use it. Um, and I think the same applies to like if you're talking about it, if you're thinking about it. And I'll tell you what, the only true AI experts are those who can think critically. Can you think critically? And I'll tell you, we're going to lose a lot of people in this world who actually think critically.
Yeah, but that's generally the case, right? That's generally, it's already happening what we talked about. People just don't want to think critically anymore, David. It's like, and it's not just AI, it was even before that. People just don't want
Sure.
to think. They don't want to put in the effort of thinking. We've made everything so easy. You want food, click of a button, it's at home. You want groceries, click of a button, it's home. You want shopping, click of a button, and it's home. You want to watch something, click of a button, it's in front of you. You don't want to choose anything, click of a button, Netflix is going to choose for you. Oh my God. Like, you're taking away our autonomy, our choice, and with that, our thinking. People are now easy to just offload everything to people. Oh, I don't want to vote. Let someone else do it. Oh, I don't want to think. Let someone else do it. And then we complain, oh, AI is going to take over. It will if you stop thinking, because the only difference between you and anything else around the world in terms of species or technology was that you had the ability to think.
Mm.
No one else
Yeah,
does.
to think critically and to
Exactly.
live in a society. How about that? to actually human rely on humans. I mean, that's the other survival technique, right? So thinking critically sets us apart from primates, but also our connections amongst one another as a society, as a tribe, as a race, sets us aside from any other, in the animal kingdom. And we've also, that has been torn and shredded decades ago. This is something that's happened subtly throughout our times. AI is now just like a whole other level of that, that is changing something in like such a compressed way that the world has never experienced before. So it's I have no crystal ball, right, as to where this is going. What you just mentioned to me, I kind of dub as like the on-demand society, the on-demand generation, right? And we evolved into that. I'm born in 1984, so I kind of in this book have coined a generation. I call it the bridge generation, right? I call it a generation of people that experienced the world a little bit before the World Wide Web, and that's a privilege, but it's also, I see it as a responsibility. Because in as much as I can talk to you about how life was with the dial-up modem and 8 stages to connect into an AOL chat room, right? And as much I can tell you about how a phone on the wall looks with a corded, wire and a rotary dial, I can talk to you. It's all in the book. I make references to all of this, and it's fun, it's entertaining, it's great. Um, but there's mechanisms behind all of this, and I question all of this. I question, how did we get so interconnected? What did globalization really mean aside from just commerce being connected in the world? And the rate at which we've evolved, I feel the bridge generation is the only generation that can really reflect and explain how we've gotten here. Several people have read this book already in full, some who are, not yet 20, some who are in their 30s, some in their 40s and 50s, and it's so interesting for me to have conversations with them because from each generation there's something different that is said, and I'm learning something and they're learning something, or they have a story to share, something familiar with it, and it's fascinating. And so we've come so far. You mentioned the on-demand generation where everything is right there at our fingertips. We experienced our evolution into that. And so what does that mean? Right? What does that mean for where we go, from here? I don't have the answers. One funny thing I'll mention, and now it seems to me ancient, okay? In writing this book, literally, I had a Word document open, a Google Doc open, and I'm writing, um, and I'm at this part in the book where the main character, Sam Noble, he's teaching Q. The whole story is about teaching Q about the human connection. Just the whole story is this Socratic dialogue that happens between the two of them, and he's there explaining, the history of Facebook and how it used to be called, face smash, face mash, right? Mark Zuckerberg, and he's explaining, yeah, and Zuckerberg has this idea, and he's in his Harvard dorm room and brushing his teeth, and he's got, toothpaste and foamy toothpaste all over his mouth, and he looks himself in the mirror and he says, I got it. I just need to mash some faces together. And like that's his like $1 million idea, but he's on this Google document, he types in Zuckerberg because Q can pull up things in the, she's pulling up different like visuals along the way. She's typing in face smash, to pull up videos and articles about it. But my point is that when I was typing Zuckerberg on the Google Doc, me literally writing and typing Zuckerberg, it filled it in automatically. I typed in ZUK and then Erberg, the rest of his last name, populated automatically on the Google Doc. And it was the first time that I'd seen that in writing, over 80,000 words. I'm like, what the fuck? I just pressed tab. All right, Zuckerberg comes out. I'm like, let me try that with Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma, nothing. Gandhi, nothing. Steve Jobs? No, nothing. Bill Gates? Only Zuckerberg. And so I'm like, why only Zuckerberg and not any of these other ones? So it was like now thinking about that automation of writing, right? It seems ancient because you could go to ChatGPT now and like you don't even have, you can type Z and it comes up, right? I don't know. It's just already so quickly. I'm like, think I'm encountering this new novel territory because Zuckerberg automatically appears on my Google Doc, and all of a sudden ChatGPT can write my entire book if it wants. Part two.
Part two, written by Q itself. That's what we're gonna say,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. It, oh, I have so many mixed emotions.
No, I am loving this conversation, to be honest, David, because it is what we are on the forefront of, right? This is what we're currently facing, an uncharted territory. We have no idea what to expect. We have no idea where we go from here. And in this day and age, where reflection is needed, I want to end this conversation by talking about what do you think we can do to bring more reflection, bring more critical thinking into our daily lives and not completely displace ourselves or, reserve ourselves for AI. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well said. And I'd like to hear yours as well, right? Because I think that at first it starts with the individual, right? It starts with what you do on a daily basis with your time, the most finite thing that we all have, right? And I think it's a matter of really reflection, self-reflection, okay? And being honest, like with yourself. You pick up the phone for a second and you just like subconsciously click on an app, like ask yourself, well, hold on, like, why did I even do that? Like, was I looking for something, right? I think if we can start to set aside a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day to this type of reflection where you're doing something else, you're going to start to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. And that's what it is. Like, we have to get out of our comfort zone a little bit, for to seek some visceral connection, to seek some real connection with ourselves and with others. And I think the only two ways that we're ever going to find that is with ourselves and with others, right? In whatever form it comes in. If it comes in writing, comes in doing yoga, if it comes in painting, whatever form, it, it is, it should be, it should feel real. It should feel something that's visceral. And you start with a minute. I don't know. Start 30 seconds. You know, but you have to start somewhere. I don't know. I don't have the answers for this.
I think I really am loving what you pointed out here about, like do something visceral, tangible.
Mm, mm,
Consciously is what I like to say, because what we're doing most of the time is unconscious. Even our work is unconscious, to be honest. We're just filling in time and checking out all the stories or something that's assigned to us and the work that is assigned to us, and we're not really thinking anymore. And I really like that there is research that we really don't like to be bored. And I think social
mm,
media and technology in general has given us a very easy out. Back in the day, you had to paint, you had to write to stay entertained. And that was a conscious effort, right? It's a conscious effort to stay entertained because no one wants to be bored. I can challenge you, David. Sit alone for 30 minutes doing nothing. You're going to get annoyed. You might enjoy it in the start, but after that, you're going to be like, what is this? Okay, I need to do something stimulating. There was research that says that 73% of the people who were asked to stay with their thoughts for 15 minutes chose to get electrocuted instead because they wanted some kind of sensation,
mm.
right? They didn't want to.
Yeah.
They didn't want to sit alone with the
Well,
thoughts.
I can get that, and I can tell you though, I can sit 30 minutes. I can sit for 30 years. I'm a little bit of an exception to the norm, and to the extent where, even this weekend, my wife is a very active person. She's very active, and I'm like, listen, Valentina, I gotta teach you the art of doing nothing. The art of doing nothing, right? So there'll be so many moments now. She's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Nothing, nothing." What do
That
you mean? You should
it's
there's
amazing.
nothing.
I would
Try
like to
doing
learn
nothing.
that.
You're right.
Yeah, try doing nothing. I would love to
It's
learn from that because I can't do it.
yeah, right. Maybe for the next 10 minutes we should just sit here and do nothing.
Just look at each other.
See who. Yeah, see who can stay on this call as well, right?
I,
If they're tuning in, be honest with yourself. Can you make it through these 10 minutes?
no,
No, but
but
it'd be amazing. Right? It's something that I spoke with somebody the other day, and somebody asked him a question. He's an influencer. His name is David Meltzer. He works a lot in the sports industry, but he went to Tahiti, and somebody asked him like, tell me something like uncomfortable that you did, recently. And he said, well, I went to this thing in Tahiti. There was like a spiritual guide, and we sat there and we had to look into a stranger's eye for about 10, 15 minutes, whatever it was, without saying anything. And he's like, it's amazing how you have all these like how the emotions you go through, like judgments maybe that you have of that person, right? Whatever it is, and like you have to deal with it, right? And it's like it's uncomfortable, it's weird, but like in the end, it's like okay, I learned something from
yeah,
that.
that's it's
Um,
shocking to be honest, David. How can you do that? I'm surprised. I would like to become a person like this. I really can. My wife says jokingly, but I really think it's true because I never got diagnosed. But she says you have ADHD, you just don't know it. Because literally, I walk around, I forget to do something, and I start doing something else because I'm like, hey, what new shiny thing? So it really, really helps me.
sure,
But before we end
sure.
this conversation, I am really curious about one thing. Did you say David Meltzer? You mean Dave Meltzer, the wrestling person? Or he's
Was
not
he a
in?
wrestler? I don't think he was a wrestler.
No, he's in
Yeah, I
the
don't think he
wrestling
was a wrestler.
journalism.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Meltzer,
Yeah,
like
Dave.
MEL
Yeah,
TZER.
MELTZER. Yeah.
He's the real life Jerry Maguire. I don't know if anybody, it's an old film, Jerry Maguire, but like he's the guy that it was based off of. He was like a
Ah.
sports agent, really successful. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a
No, no,
wrestler.
he's in wrestling journalism. He's one of the biggest voices. I don't know if he's
Oh,
the same
okay.
guy, but there's a guy called Dave Meltzer, and he has his own radio show,
Maybe.
and he does his own
Okay.
thing. I do not know if it's the same guy, but
Could
that would be
be.
really shocking.
I don't know. This guy does like a million different things, so I honestly wouldn't be surprised. But
But yes, I think
could be
that
another coincidence.
could be
Just
another
like
question.
Amazon and
Just like
OpenAI
Q.
taking the cue,
That
you
brings
know.
us that brings us full circle, or I would like to call it full Q, ladies and gentlemen. I Am Q, book written by David Cantor. It's available everywhere, right, David?
Yeah, Amazon. Well, I guess that's everywhere, right?
Yeah, Amazon. And please go buy yourself a copy. I think it's a wonderful book, and I really am looking forward to seeing what you come up with next, David. And I really had fun today. Anything you want to say before we
Thanks,
call it
Ahad.
off?
Likewise. No, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I feel like there's so much to talk about, right?
Yeah,
So I guess if there's anything that people will pull away from this, it's like if you're not going to look at other people for about 15 minutes and not speak, look at yourself in the mirror for about 30 seconds then.
sit
Okay?
with yourself. Yeah,
Think about things. Reflection, self-reflection. It goes a long way in this day and age, and
yeah.
I think it's necessary for us to keep our thread, and our connections amongst one another. So, Ahad, I really enjoyed this conversation. I wish you the best of luck with the podcast. You're a wonderful host, so it's a privilege to be on your show.
Thank you so much, David. And with that, thank you so much, everybody, for your time. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again. Have a nice Friday. Oh, happy nice
All
Friday.
right.
Bye bye. I just want to give you guys a heads up. The Roundtable is beginning for January 2024. The Roundtable is a mastermind group where I try to bring like minded yet cross functional people in one room under my facilitation, where we will go through goals, ideas, obstacles, even debates, where people are interested about something, they want to learn something from everyone else in the group and basically become a better version of themselves. I'm really, really enthusiastic about this project, and I'm really looking forward to seeing any one of you who wants to sign up and be part of the process. The link is on the website, of course, to sign up. And if you go to our Instagram or any of our social media links, you will see the link as well. It is also here below in the show notes. So if you're interested, just click the link, fill out the form, and I will catch you in an introductory call. Thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you next time.